Because you got powerful legs. How'd you get the physique? Was it gym or how'd you get the physique?
I've always been.
She's actually not got powerful legs. Do you shower in your dressing room? Do you have a shower on the day of a fight or not? Tell us about the tattoos.
Shut the fuck up, you little prick.
But then I've got the Phoenix.
Hey, prick.
So I'll take it from Bob every day of the week.
Absolute disgrace.
That's your knowing mind.
Move him out of here, Derek.
Ricky Hatton didn't go over for his fighter because he risked getting abducted and sold into sexual
I never said that.
Both have been rape victims. I'm not watching Frank Buglioni live on Saturday night. You're out of your mind.
Jesus Christ, get yourself a life.
He's actually a priest.
Yeah.
It's because his brother John Fury eye gouged him.
What have I told you all this time? He's going to end up sucked out, fucked out, looking for a handout.
Boxing nutters messenger group. I'm gonna be the king.
J-Pump. You know what I'm saying?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 580 of the Boxing Asylum Nuthouse podcast. I do not bear the dulcet Wolverhampton tones of Steve Wellings, but I'm from a similar neck of the woods. I am your host, Eamon Khan, finding my groove in the imprints left by previous hosts Wellington and DJ Leonardo. And we are live every week, 8 p.m. on YouTube and other platforms, and you can listen back to the podcast at your leisure on selected platforms too. You know the drill, nothing less on Spotify than 5 stars will do. Tonight we'll be going through the week that was in boxing, featuring, yes, of course, Jake Paul versus Mike Perry, with Mike Tyson targeted in the future. Heeney versus Pauls as well too. The rematch, I was there live and in colour, in the flesh myself, working for seconds out. Saw spits and spats of the card, but I'll do my best to cover what I did see, and looking forward to previewing some of the week's action this weekend with Joyce versus Chisora, 2 heavyweights battling out to see who can maybe land a ticket to Saudi Arabia for one last big fight. Please do, if you haven't already, click the like button, subscribe, share your comments as well too. I'll read them out in the podcast as well. But without further ado, it's not just myself here on the podcast. We do have guests, as some of the usual regulars will be joining me later on in the pod, but my good friend and co-host of the Wanna Fight About It podcast, Dunner Corby, has joined me. Base Chad, he calls himself. I can attest to that, as he is. Dunner, how you doing? How's life?
Yo, what's good, Eamon? It's good. So first off, what's the policy on swearing here? What words am I allowed to say? The George Carlin 7 words? I'm not allowed to say those?
I don't know what they are. Some of these references that you have, Dunner, you know, they kind of fly over my head a little bit, but if you want to swear, then fucking go for it, by all means.
Okay, right, base. I won't. I'm like Howard Stern. Now that you've told me I can, I don't want to. But if you told me I wasn't allowed, like on seconds out, then I would have actually chosen to swear. Anyway, how are you?
I'm good. I would have said you're more like Beetlejuice than Howard Stern.
I would say actually you're maybe more like that.
Well, let's jump straight into it. This is more your neck of the woods, Dunner, with, well, first of all, Clarissa Shields is handing out passes. No, not that kind of pass. But there was a question asked on Twitter was, Jake Paul, do you see him as a legitimate boxer? And Clarissa Shields chimed back on Twitter, and she said, look, now that he's had these fights, you've got to take him as a legitimate boxer. I see him that way. And I guess this legitimate boxer had to have a stopgap fight before he gets to Mike Tyson. That fight was rescheduled for later on in the year. Up steps Mike Perry, the problem child, Jake Paul. I think he's calling himself what? El Gallo. He's steaming towards that Mike Tyson date on a mega deal on Netflix, which is bound to be the biggest event of the year. But firstly, Dunner, what a knockout! Ashton Sil versus Prince Badi, unreal.
Oh my gosh, what a crazy finish! I mean, Ashton pretty much dominating proceedings. It's going more or less to plan, and then boom, like it's seeming shot from the gods is the phrase people use, and yeah, it caused quite a stir online. I mean, he got Tyron Woodley, unfortunately, and I think it was jubilation for Badi, of course, and I mean, what a moment for him, coming in as the away fighter, obviously more experienced as a pro and been around longer, but geez, to do that to someone like H2O Silv is unbelievable, and it'll be really, really, really fascinating now to look at where Silv goes from here, because he was supposed to face Floyd Schofield, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's right.
Philip's brother.
That's right. No. God,
he was going to fight, and that would have been a big fight. I think Schofield turned down a chance at Shakur Stevenson because he wanted to be on Netflix against H2O. So we'll see if H2O is back, or if he might jump on that September card. I think it's going to be headlined by Javon Walton in Orlando. So we'll see. But yeah, what a result! Unbelievable.
I saw the ref cop some stick for, really kind of grabbing Buddy by his shorts and stopping him from celebrating. I think Matty was saying the same thing in the chat, actually. But I kind of thought, look, that's probably the right move, because watching that KO back before they eventually put it out on the broadcast, he was like twitching a little bit there. We didn't know what condition he was. So it was a good call to really kind of allay some of the celebrations.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, like those knockouts are so brutal that you would see like coaches or referees being like, all right, chill out on the celebrations for a little bit. And we just had to make sure that Ashton was okay. But it looks like he is. I saw B Dave posting from the team house this week or this morning. So I think they're all good. Did you see all the drama with that girl Fangs who does Misfits?
She was there, was she?
No, but she's like a YouTuber who's boxed. She's terrible. I mean, they're all terrible, but she's like 0-2. She's been viciously battered both times. And she basically put out a tweet like, at least I never went out like this, with a picture of Ashton Sil laying on the ground. And terrible. It's like, yeah, you were, and B Dave like completely went in on her. And I think the tweet was going viral until she deleted it. But just like the worst way to carry on when you're 0-2 and you're shit. It's not a good way to behave. But this was like a big moment from last night. I think luckily Ashton's okay though.
Good to see that Ashton's okay. Let's get to the main event of it. Jake Paul again moving up and not moving up. Well, yeah, he was moving up to heavyweight, isn't he? Against Mike Perry. Mike Perry somewhat outweighed other reports here by 40 pounds, I think it was, and showed a granite chin to survive as long as he did there. But this was a case of Jake Paul taking on another mixed martial artist and eventually getting the stoppage. He did what he had to do. Did he look good in doing what he did, Dunno?
No, I don't think so. I mean, people were I don't believe this to be the case. I mean, he has lost fights before, but people were calling it, his worst performance. And given like that Perry just walked towards him with his hands down, he probably should have been able to deal with him. I mean, people forget that during the build-up for this, he was supposed to fight Mike Tyson at heavyweight. So he got himself up to, I think, 230 or 235, and then had to proceed to lose that again in order to make cruiserweight. He just about made cruiserweight for this fight. I think he used the towel. He missed initially and then took his shorts off and used the towel and made it. And like that is going to be tough. There can't have been much like hard boxing training going on there. And it's I was talking to people about it as well. And it's like, yeah, they're saying how terrible the performance was and he gassed out in the second round, all of that. But it would be one of his best performances if Mike Perry just stayed down. You know what I mean? So it's a hard one to gauge, but yeah, not super impressive from Jake. And I think Mike Tyson will be licking his lips.
These events are absolute spectacles, and there's all sorts of stuff going on where I tuned into this, and I think it was like 2-3 a.m. I got home from the Magnificent 7 card presented by Frank Warren and Queensbury Promotions. And I was knackered. I thought I'd just stay up and see how long I could last here. And then it's 10 minutes before the main event, and you're getting an advert where Jake Paul's arm is getting pulled out, and there's fire in the dressing room, and there's some chicken going on, like running amok, and some crazy kind of vivid moments in there. But these are sold out events, it seems, where people come and watch the fights from the off, and they're really into this. Who's selling these shows? Is it Jake selling the shows, or is it Amanda selling the shows? So they made a savvy move, Most Valuable Promotions, in bringing Amanda in so she can shift the tickets, and Jake Paul looks like the megastar.
I think they do a good job of like picking the right card in general, because like the crowd, the reaction when Chavez Jr. walked out in the first fight of the pay-per-view was huge. I'm sure he probably shifted a few tickets in Florida, and Uriah Hall as well, not a small name either in the UFC world. And then, of course, like Mike Perry he's from Flint, Michigan, but his adopted home is Orlando, just down the road from Tampa. So I'd imagine he was probably the big ticket shifter. And there was this whole thing about how they weren't selling and they were doing a 2-for-1 ticket deal and all this stuff. And tickets were very cheap. I think they started at $20, but they got it filled in the end. And I think they ended up with over 17,000 in there, which is, it's unbelievable for a fight that didn't exist 4.5-5 weeks ago. That's a very good return, and for what is absolutely advertised as a stay busy fight. Like, you don't really see that in boxing much, where like they will explicitly have another fight laid out. Like, oh yeah, on November 15th you can go watch the real fight, but here's a keep busy, and they still managed to sell 17,000 tickets, which is, I think, pretty impressive.
You're fully entrenched in the MMA world. I've got a question here from Matt Butter saying, didn't he call out Alex Pereira in the aftermath? Just a little bit on Alex Pereira, or Pereira, I think you pronounce it correctly. Anthony Joshua come out and said that Pereira is this brilliant talent and he should do boxing. I then put that to Eddie Hearn and I said, who would you put Pereira in with? You're the promoter. And Pereira suggested the likes of Chisora or Joyce, maybe either the winner or the loser of that. But do you think we'll see Alex Pereira if he can get out of his UFC contract in some sort of boxing match, whether it be the Jake Paul side or more of the traditional side of boxing against someone like a Chisora or Joyce?
Yeah, I mean, Alex is still very much in the midst of his UFC run. Now, to be fair, he has dragged them out of a few scrapes this year. You know, he came in on short-ish notice for the UFC 300 main event, and then really short notice, like a couple of weeks, with an injury. Ironically, he had the injury that forced Conor McGregor out of UFC 303. He had the same one, he had a broken toe, and still went on and fought. So he has helped them out of a few scrapes. I think they owe him one, but maybe they wouldn't see it that way. He won't be allowed out to fight anyone like Jake. I'd imagine he wouldn't be allowed out to fight anyone like, you said Eddie was saying like a Derek Chisora, Joe Joyce type. And that is, Eddie is a phenomenal, we were talking about this the other day off the air. Eddie is an unbelievable, like, backhanded complimenter. He's the fucking best. Like, because if you're saying, yeah, I think if he came over, he could fight a Derek Chisora type of guy, you're essentially saying he's shit, and he might, he could maybe fight someone who's completely washed. And what he is saying by not saying it is definitely not AJ or Fury or Usyk or anything like that, or any of the cruiserweights, Jaya Pataya, even a Marius Bradis type. Because he's a 205er. He was down even as low as 185. So he's not really a heavyweight, even though he's big. He's 6'4", and he balloons up to around 230 after he weighs in at 205. But yeah, I think the Jake Paul route is more likely, and it won't be happening anytime soon because he's the guy for the UFC at the moment, and they won't be letting him out.
Let me get a bit more from you on Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. We've spoken about him before and past on our conversations on the phone about Chavez Jr. He's now seen by the hardcore audience as a bit of a comedy figure, someone who has no real point in the sport in a serious nature, and it seems to have been going that direction because he's now looking to call out Jake Paul for a fight, and that's been kind of mooted and thrown out about a little bit. I wonder if if that was any serious proposition there. But Chavez Jr., did he look like someone who could do something? Did he look like as faded as we believe to have seen him in the ring in his recent performances, and should he have done better against an MMA guy in the form of Uriah Hall?
Oh, yeah, he looked terrible. I thought there was an argument to be made that he lost the fight or that it was a draw. He was dreadful. Uriah Hall was pushing the pace the entire time. weird commentary from was it Gabe Rosado was on the call?
Yeah, Gabe and Tyrone went, wasn't it?
Unbelievably, like Rosado was like, yeah, Uriah Hall can't box at all as he's like winning the fight, I thought. But you know, he would just say things like obviously Uriah like has absolutely no boxing ability. Like he would just blurt that out. And Woodley was kind of like, yeah, but how's he winning the fight then? And Ariel saying the same. So yeah, I thought Uriah Hall impressed. I wouldn't mind seeing him in again with maybe a Darren Till. And then for Chavez Jr., he won. I thought the scorecards were wild. 5 rounds to 1 on 2 of them, I think. And then 4-2 on the other one. I thought it was closer to 3-3 or maybe even 4-2 to Uriah Hall. And he called out Jake. And from what I understand, if you remember when Jake was going back and forth, Jake and Nikisa and Mams Taylor and KSI, about like a possible fight with him, with KSI, they mentioned, Nikisa mentioned, and it kind of was brushed aside, that they're busy in May next year, which I think would imply perhaps a Cinco de Mayo fight. And of course, the guy to do that would probably be Chavez.
You're swimming in the shallow waters here, the deep waters, I probably should say a better phrase, of the hardcore boxing audience who have Jake's kind of chipped away at them and he's kind of turned the hardcores a little bit more towards him in their favor from some of the stuff he's done, taking the boxing career seriously, trying to fight some legitimate boxers, even though it might be more so in his favor, trying to create some sort of union or speaking about that a union for boxers, trying to bring in the likes of Amanda Serrano and betting their career from his spotlight. But is he at risk of losing and throwing that favor away from going back into this sort of thing, from now fighting Mike Tyson, which has turned a lot of people off, even though that's expected to be probably the biggest boxing event of the year, huge Netflix deal. It's going to be absolutely massive. Is he going to lose that backing from the hardcore audience?
Well, he's in a very tumultuous spot against Tyson because he can't. By the way, Matt is correct. They were both terrible. They were both fucking awful. But he was in a spot where, like, if he just knocks out Mike in the first few seconds and like it's fairly vicious, and you just see this 58-year-old Mike Tyson who everybody loves just laying on the canvas like Ashton Sil, that wouldn't be good. That would be like bad for Jake. But then if he loses to Mike, that's fucking terrible too. So he kind of has to like, and Mike Tyson is also not the kind of guy, even at 58, that you want to carry and give a few rounds to. You know what I mean? Like you can't really lay on the ropes and let Mike hit you a little bit. It just that's not the kind of fight you can do, especially when you're Jake Paul and you're not even that good.
I
think
let's make that point.
Yeah, like so he's in a really tough spot against Mike. And then, I don't know if he goes from this Mike Tyson fight into Chavez Jr., that's probably worse for the hardcores than him beating up the MMA fighters, who I think like a Rob Tebbett type of guy would probably like seeing these MMA fighters get schooled by a pretty bad boxer. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's more a question for the chat, for the guys in there. Like, is it the right way for him to go? But yeah, he's in a weird spot at the moment. Is he going to get them back or not? I'm not sure.
Well, let's pose that question to the chat. Let me know what you think on where you stand on Jake Paul, who was fighting legitimate fighters, even though it was in his favor. Now is looking to take on one of the legends in the game in Mike Tyson. Just going off of Jake Paul for a second, Amanda Serrano, we mentioned there about her and her pulling power. Stevie Morgan, for what ended up happening, she talked a real good game about how this was Amanda's time to falter. She was one of the women in the division who's probably one for the picking because she was getting a little bit older. She was slipping, and boy, did this show the levels in the top level of the women's boxing game and everything else below that, because she got, well, not quite smoked like Ashton Sil did, but she was completely out of her depth there.
Yeah, and also she probably wasn't even wrong that Amanda is kind of past it. Like, she couldn't knock out Heather Hardy. She couldn't knock out a lot of different girls at the weight, like at her weight and stuff. So, and she was at one point a big knockout artist. So Amanda is past her best. Like, Stevie was probably right in that, but jeez, yeah. I wonder, does that make Sky Nicholson go like, oh, I don't know, maybe I should chill out on this whole calling out Amanda Serrano thing.
That fight with Katie Taylor, that rematch, that's set in stone? That's going to happen. Who are you favoring in that one, Donna?
That's on the Jake and Mike card. Those are the two fights that guaranteed stuck on the card. So they might try to sneak on Chavez and Darren Till as well, because hopefully they would be thinking that Darren Till's not as polished as Uriah Hall, and that's saying a lot because Uriah Hall wasn't great. But I think that's sticking on the card. And look, Katie won the first one. It was a close fight, not as close as people say. Katie definitely did win it. I think it's anyone's fight because they're both past their best. They're past where they were that night in Madison Square Garden 2 years ago. So, I mean, it's going to be tough on Amanda jumping up 2 more weight classes. I mean, she struggled to make the weight up for the initial fight. And this one, I think, is at super lightweight. So that's going to be tough for her. And I guess that all favors Katie Taylor.
I know this is a huge event and everything. And, fighters would naturally clamor to want to be on this Netflix card, this Netflix big deal. I'm sort of half answering my own question there, but for someone who's such a pioneer in the form of Katie Taylor and in Amanda Serrano too, I do find it weird that they want to have this occasion on and kind of have the spotlight stolen from them from what is essentially a bit of a joke.
Yeah, what Nikisa told me was that this was like kind of a Nikisa Baderi from Most I talked to him, like not on the record or anything, but like just in conversations, like that basically this is part of the deal for the Netflix thing. Is like we want Jake versus Mike for the kind of the numbers, and then we want a very, very serious co-main event. We want serious boxing happening after that stage. So I think that that it's a big deal. It's a fight that matters a lot to women's boxing. Obviously, the first one was incredible. If Amanda wins, potentially you go to Croke Park for the trilogy. There's definitely huge potential there for this card, and I think it's great that it's on such a huge platform. What he also told me was that promotionally, the plan is everything Jake and Mike do, Katie and Amanda will be there too. So any TV appearances on big shows, anything like that, it will very much be promoted as Netflix presents Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson and Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano.
I just don't know about Croke Park and Katie ever getting that opportunity to fight at Croke Park, having that homecoming. They've sort of kind of already sold that ticket for the homecoming at the 3 Arena against Chantal Cameron and then doing it again. And, Eddie kind of said that we couldn't get the assistance that we needed, even with Conor McGregor sponsoring the events. We couldn't get it over the line. It would be a damn shame if Katie Taylor didn't get that opportunity to fight at Croke Park, but it just doesn't seem realistic, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's probably not realistic. I don't know, but it would be nice. It would be cool.
Cool. What's cool for the Irish is cool for Gwotington. I believe this is former host of the podcast, Steve Wellings, I should say. Steve, is that you? Knock, knock. Who's there?
I'm doing an Ames on Ames coming in, not knowing who this is, sneaking in through the back door. I know you two boys are going to be talking about Jake Paul, I bet you.
We've been talking about it already. And oh, how the tables have turned, Steve. I had that line buried in my back pocket, but you've stolen it from me already.
Oh, well, that's what I do. How you keeping, all right?
Yeah, all good, all good. Did you catch any of Jake Paul versus Mike Perry?
I did. I watched the whole fight, actually. I think Jake Paul, we have to accept him now as a real boxer, don't we? He's not great. We've seen that before when he stepped up against Tommy Fury. We kind of saw what happened, and that wasn't much of a step up. Against these kind of guys, he gives you what people want. He beats them up. He gets rid of them. The crowd go wild. He makes these projections that he's going to come and fight against world-class fighters. He's never going to be at that level, but he's always comes in decent shape. He gets rid of people, which I'm a fan of. If you're in against an overmatched opponent like that guy was last night, he brought a tattooed face to the ring, which I'm always a fan of as well. And the fella kept on pitching that Pereira. So he did his best. But as for Jake Paul, we know what he is. You just suppose you've got to enjoy it or hate it as he presents it. And it's supposed to be Tyson last night. Didn't turn out to be that way. And he still managed to pack out the arena. So I hesitate to say good luck to him, but he's doing his thing, really. The Zone seem to be on board as well. And the road show is rolling on for another night at least.
What's your feeling on this Mike Tyson fight? Do you think it's a choreographed dance? Do you think this is a real fight, as apparently Mike Tyson was pushing for? What actually do you think you'll end up seeing later on this year?
Who even knows? I don't even know at this stage what we're going to end up seeing. I mean, the best, I'm old enough to remember not the best version of Tyson. Tyson was kind of in around the 1994, 95 region. The Frank Bruno fights was when I was really aware of Tyson. So he wasn't at his peak then. We can't really say so, but he was still a devastating force. But I remember sitting up and watching his fight against Kevin McBride. And that guy was, 20 years ago? And that was what we saw the last time in a boxing ring. I know he's fought Roy Jones since and all that type of stuff. But doing these things on the pads and doing these little highlight videos and that is one thing. But this is an old man now who smokes a lot of weed. And even though Paul's very limited, I think the longer that kind of fight goes on, it could get ugly in every respect. But as for the choreograph thing, I just don't know. I'm not really sure if Tyson goes along with those type of things. But he's going to gas out at some point, and a lot of these youngsters, these youth, are going to like to see Jake Paul getting one over on old Tyson. But I really don't know what to expect in answer to your question, James. I honestly have no idea what he's going to go down that night. I know they're going to make a hell of a lot of money. They're trading off Tyson's name, and Jake Paul seems to be the master of selling things. So who knows what could transpire? It could be boring. It could be ugly. It could be two guys just slumped on top of each other. But I'll tune in like everybody else.
Was the Roy Jones exhibition against Mike Tyson, was that palatable for you for what it turned out to be?
It wasn't too bad. I wasn't sure what to expect that night because we'd been again, I go back to my own sort of boxing career. I remember at the time there was talk of Tyson maybe even fighting Roy Jones when Roy Jones was floating up around heavyweight, around the John Ruiz fight and all that. But both of the guys were so far removed from their prime. And Roy had sort of tainted his legacy a little bit as well to that point by constantly fighting. I think he's fighting again in a few weeks against somebody maybe out in Russia. But it wasn't a peak version of either of them. And Roy's knees were supposed to be so bad he couldn't move. Tyson, again, we'd seen him doing the 30-second pad workouts. And so I was just thinking, what's going to go on here? Is Roy going to be able to get through the time? Is Mike going to gas out? But they didn't. They kept it respectful, and it wasn't too bad for what I saw there. But whether that'll happen in the Jake Paul fight, I don't know. But no, it wasn't. It was quite palatable. To answer your question, James, I wasn't too bothered by that one.
That KO that was on the undercard, Steve, I'm sure you probably managed to get a chance to see the clip of it. One that's going to be replayed for many a year and might end up being that knockout of the year top contender there. What a moment for Bardi, who was the clear underdog and was losing that fight, reminiscent of Wood Warrington. But for a prospect who is touted about, and I've seen some people in the industry like Sir Lou DiBella saying, look, I wasn't sold on this kid. Dan Raphael saying the same sort of thing. We've been, sold a dodgy product here, I guess. But he's going to have a hard time coming back from that vicious knockout.
Yeah. Oh, no, he will. I wasn't aware of him too much. I had heard about him, and I heard that he was signed up to Jake Paul. So some people saw Ashton Sil as a bit of a gimmick, but other people were saying, no, this kid can fight. But a couple of the podcasts I was listening to before the fight were saying that Lucas Bardi wasn't someone to be slept on. He was a very good amateur in the Canadian system, and he might cause a few problems. And Silva, I think, was supposed to fight Floyd Schofield originally on the Tyson undercard, which was a really, really good fight. I was looking forward to that one, actually, because Schofield is a fighter who's impressed me, and the fact they were coming together across the promotions and that was something to behold. And I watched the fight in its entirety, and Silva was absolutely bossing the fight. He was winning every second of it. He was dominating Bardi, and then he just caught him with that 3-punch combination, culminating in that left hook, and it was as sweet of a shot as you would see. And talk about a comeback, it was the ultimate comeback. The guy right down, getting battered, sort of Foreman Mora kind of, obviously not on that sort of stratosphere, but that kind of thing. One guy just looked like he's absolutely done for. He's going to be outboxed, and he comes round and lands the big shot and lands a highlight reel knockout. You see Ashton Sil just flat out on the canvas, face down. The referee trying to grab Bardi's shorts and trying to calm him down from celebrating and all. It was quite the spectacle, actually. And that's what they put on, really, this MVP crowd. They put on spectacles, and that was sort of fitting with the brand to see something like that, because people want to see that kind of excitement. And, as for Silv, he can come again. But it was just the punch of a lifetime from Bardi.
Yeah, it was a great comeback from Bardi. Don't call it a comeback for Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. We were talking about gimmicks there. Chavez Jr. very much seen as a gimmick now with him and his prospects of having a serious fight in boxing. He's called out Jake Paul and wants that fight there. I believe it was met with groans and boos from a section of the crowd there. But what about Chavez Jr.? I mean, I always feel he gets a bit of unfair stick considering of the juniors, of the children of legends or, good boxers, whatever you want to call it. Obviously a legend with Chavez Jr., but other fighters and their children. I think he's had a good career, and to win a world title as well too, and have a moment that will stand in time that's remembered, even though he didn't beat Martinez. He's created one of those moments. I think he's kind of hard done by, but when you see his name on a bill, what's your overriding feeling?
Well, you're right what you say there. No, he has become a bit of a gimmick. His reputation and his legacy or whatever has really diminished, obviously, for his antics.
This is a guy who beat Andy Lee.
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say that's a guy who beat Andy Lee, fought the likes of Sebastian Zabik as well, got outboxed for 11 rounds against Sergio Martinez, as you referenced, and came back and had him in all sorts of trouble in that last round. This is a guy who went 12 rounds with Canelo. He didn't beat Canelo. He didn't show like he was going to win many rounds or any rounds against Canelo, but he went 12 rounds against one of the best fighters in the world. He was absolutely no gimmick. Like you said, he beat Andy Lee. I know there's funny stuff going on there, but the caliber of opponent he's been in with and been competitive with, even Danny Jacobs, he hasn't gone out there and been wiped out like these other influences. He shouldn't be at that level. He's here now because he's trading on his name, and it's heavy. It's hard to carry these things on your shoulders, being the sons of these legends, carrying that Chavez name, the same as like your Benz, your Eubanks will as well. Adam Hamed, obviously carrying Prince Nazim's name, right back to Camacho, Pryor, Frazier. There's all that Mathis Jr., all these sons trying to carry on their father's legacies. And I think Chavez has probably tainted his now, but he's taken the last dregs, the last crumbs of currency from his name, I think, from what he once was, which you rightly outlined. He was a good, competent world-level fighter at a very high level, and now he's fighting on these kind of circus shows. He's getting booed. He's doing all sorts of antics outside of the ring, and he might well end up fighting the likes of Jake Paul. Again, another name like Tyson. Get that Chavez name on your record. People just recognise the name. They don't see the state that these people are in. So he'll get a few more paydays. He got another win against the fella last night. So, I mean, what can you do? He's just cashing out the name, really, I think.
I think as well, what's interesting is not interesting so much as funny, is that they talk on the broadcast about like the legendary Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. as if like he's a legend of the sport, not that he's like famous for his dad being a legend.
Yeah, that's a good point. Exactly. Yeah, he's by no means a legend, but at the same time, he's had a good career. He's done well for himself. He must have made a load of money. Probably doesn't know what to do with himself now.
Well, he's just had a rehab, right, a couple of weeks ago, so he'll probably blame that for why he wasn't in the best shape. And they'll give him another shot on the Netflix card in November. If they're able to get Darren Till a visa, that'll be the fight they'll give him. And he should beat Darren Till, similarly to how he beat Uriah Hall. And then I think they're, like I was saying, Eamon earlier, I think that they're already... there was a big feud between Jake Paul and KSI, and one of the remarks that was made was his manager said, well, we're not free next May. So that sounds to me like they may be planning some sort of a Cinco de Mayo show with Chavez Jr. next year.
All right, okay, yeah. Yeah, they do tend to bring these kind of guys in. Your misfits, your crossovers, your faded names, your has-beens and your never-weres, mixed in with guys being brought over from combat sports, like your Askren, wasn't it, before, and Perry and this Woodley. They've got just enough credibility that they can fight. They're not boxers, but they've done a bit of bare knuckle or a bit of kickboxing or a bit of MMA. Everyone knows I'm clueless to these things. UFC. There's a bit of a background of fighting there. They've had a fight in a street. I think Jake Paul said before this fight, Perry, he's a bad man. He has a history of violence, and this was what qualified him for this fight, even though his previous fight, I think, was about 10 years ago, and he got absolutely obliterated in Florida. But the fact they have some semblance of fighting spirit in them means they can be bought in, and characters like Perry, like Chavez, they're going to absolutely sell.
Well, Perry's been on this unbelievable run in the bare knuckle fighting championship, but the issue in bare knuckle is that the skill set of what would make you a journeyman is what makes you good in bare knuckle. So like the ability to take punishment, like you see, like historically in that sport, like the big stars, Mike Perry's one of them, couldn't buy a win in the UFC at the top level, but he's beating world champions like Eddie Alvarez, Luke Rockhold, who are like legitimate hard-hitting UFC world champions who would be considered, Alvarez anyway, as like particularly violent types of guys. But he's just able to outlast them because their hands break and their teeth break, and it's really, really gruesome. And a lot of them just don't fancy it after a couple of rounds. Artem Lobov beat Paulie Malignaggi. At one stage, Paulie Malignaggi like an absolute top level boxer at his prime, and Lobov a journeyman UFC fighter at his prime. Like it was the skill set that makes you a decent journeyman makes you great at bare knuckle, but then in actual boxing, it you obviously get found out like Mike Perry did very quickly.
Yeah, you're a braver man than me to watch that, Donna, to be honest. And I say that as a lifelong boxing fan, but I just find the bare knuckle, there's something just so gruesome about it. And getting hit flush with those shots. And as you said, the broken knuckles, the broken nose, the face pissing with blood, and there's cuts everywhere. And you're just soaking up this punishment. And that is your, oh, isn't he brilliant? He's soaking up all this punishment, man. It's amazing. I don't know. I'm kind of winced behind the curtain, to be honest.
But it wins them fights because, like, you would have seen, like, Mike Perry's had this great winning run. It's primarily his stoppage wins are just guys quitting between rounds or whatever. And then, like, if he makes it to the end, he generally tends to have done more damage later on because he can, like you saw it last night, he'll just walk down with his hands down and take shots. And if you drop him, he'll just get back up and keep coming at you. Like people were saying it was Jake's worst showing last night, or one of his worst. It wasn't so much that it was his worst as like he probably wasn't expecting it to go too far past 1 or 2 rounds.
Mm.
And then Mike got up after getting viciously dropped in. The knockdown in the first was kind of like he was kind of caught a bit, but then the second it was fairly hardcore, and he managed to stick with it. And then Jake, you could tell was cream crackered by the end of the by the end of the third, really, and they were pouring water on him and ice and everything, and trying to get his breathing back, because he also was moving up to heavyweight, then back down to cruiserweight for this one, and now back up to heavyweight again. So trying to keep some of the weight on. I'd imagine it was a rough El camp for Jake.
Yeah, no, I like the way Jake, he's got that big mop of hair, hasn't he, that's covered in sweat and water, and he's up there with Nathan Heeney, who I'm sure you'll talk about later, and Katie Taylor, as the person who looks most knackered after about 2 rounds in a fight.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Just on you saying that Chavez Jr. might be tied up for a Cinco de Mayo date, there was a very conveniently timed teaser announcement from one Andre Ward talking about how he wants all the smoke, and cruiserweight great there might light heavyweight great there might want to return to cruiserweight and have another crack at it, starting off with a potential fight with Chavez Jr. Is that something that either of you could see happening there, that return for Andre Ward? Or is he just teasing for the sake of teasing?
No, I don't want to see Andre Ward back again, to be honest. But then I'm a hater when it comes to Andre Ward. I couldn't stand his style when he was fighting, and his attitude to match as well. I'm not a Ward fan at all. So get gone, Andre. I say, stay retired. Look, he was a great fighter. Did everything he had to do to win. Absolutely everything within the rules and out the rules. And he often had the deck stacked in his favour. He was the complete fighter. He knew exactly what to do at all the right times, but he wasn't easy on the eye. He wasn't easy to deal with. And I was glad when he retired. So Donna might think differently, but I say stay retired, sir.
I know he probably should stay retired. And he also, Chavez Jr. is absolutely, completely and utterly washed. I would imagine Andre Ward probably not. He retired at a much better time and hasn't done like a comeback thing yet. So I would think that if someone like a Jake Paul was trying to fight an Andre Ward, that would even now be ill-advised.
Yeah, I agree.
Donna, just before we let you go, a couple of things I want to tie up with you. I know you're a big fan of the Queen, Clarissa Shields, who is moving up to heavyweight next weekend to capture the heavyweight crown. What of Clarissa's next claim to add to her legacy?
She's moving to light heavyweight. She's moving to 175.
Oh, is it light heavyweight? I thought it was full heavyweight.
No, she's a 168 pounder or something, isn't she?
Well, she's looking to add to her legacy, the quote there.
Those famous heavyweight women's boxers.
Is it for the heavyweight title, but they're weighing in at like light heavyweight or cruiserweight or something? Is that what's going on here?
Might be the case there, yeah.
Don't listen to me. Sure, what do I know? I'm going to check it out right now. Clarissa Shields, let's see. So she's fighting Joanna LePage Joannis. 10-2s. Well, yeah, heavyweight. It says WBC, WBF. Big fan of that. WBO vacant light heavyweight title. Okay, so there's 2 heavyweight titles. one of which is the WBF, and one light heavyweight title on the line here. So she's doing both. There you go.
So good, Donna, that she can transition between the weights in the same fight.
It's unbelievable. Has anyone ever done it before? The Quote wins again.
But you've got a point here, actually, Donna, because when Miss, what do you call her again? LePage Joannis fought for the WBC vacant heavyweight title in March, she weighed in at 173 and her opponent weighed in at 170. So, yeah, that's light heavyweight, isn't it?
A couple of big heavyweights. I'd imagine. I mean, I don't know any female athlete in any sport who's 200 plus pounds. Is there a WNBA player or something who would be 6'10" or something? I don't know, but it would be rare that you would just the way that women's bodies are that you would be an athletic in any way competitor and be 200 plus. So maybe light heavyweight is the highest it goes. I'm not sure.
Well, they used to be. Now I'm going off. I apologize in advance. You know what I'm like. There used to be a heavyweight called Laura Ramsey, and she was 54 when she was fighting in 2020.
Oh,
and she was 5'5", and she weighed in at 256 against Gwendolyn O'Neill.
She was a real looker.
Gwendolyn O'Neill, the stealth bomber from Brooklyn, and she was 240. So they fought for the heavyweight. They fought for some kind of heavyweight belt back in the day. I remember them too.
That's unbelievable. And the 240 pounder, was she 5'7" as well?
I don't know. I think she was coming in about 5'6", 5'7". So she had the height and reach advantage.
Oh man, they must have been real pretty girls.
Not by the end of the 6 rounds. So.
They want to get on some of the doctor's old okra soup, some of those heavyweight ladies. Donna, I'll move you on for now. Great to have you on here, joining me on my debut, making your
Shout
debut.
out the quote.
Shout out the quote, indeed. For anyone who wants to follow you on social media, where can they find you? And you also got your own podcast as well, too. Where can they find you to have more of a listener there?
At Donna Corby on Instagram. Throw a little underscore at the end of that for Twitter. And Want to Fight a Better podcast on Spotify. Give it a listen, and in fact, tune out of this and go listen to the Want to Fight a Better podcast instead.
Cheeky. Much appreciated, Donna. We'll see you.
Love you, brother. Right.
Good man. Exit Donna Corby. In comes Rob Kelly. Rob, how you doing? Is he ready? Here we go.
Almost ready. Give us a second there, Ames.
No worries.
What's going on? New format.
New format, new beginnings, I guess. The rebirth, the re-debut.
Exciting times, dude.
Exciting times for boxing, indeed. We'll move on to actually. Well, wish you well, much appreciated. Whilst Rob is getting himself sorted, Steve, we'll move on to Heaney versus Pauls 2, the rematch. Magnificent 7, somewhat turned into mediocre 7 after a couple of fights fell off the card. Liam Davis catching pneumonia in his camp, so had to pull out of the much anticipated bit of a taste of a potential second go around of the Matchroom versus Queensbury, where Queensbury wiped the floor with Matchroom, but that wasn't to be. Shabazz Masood ended up being in a run out. We'll hopefully see that rescheduled. And then also Sol Dakers versus David Adelaide, a bit of unknown as to, well, Adelaide pulled out with an injury, but there was things going on in the background as well too regarding his status with the British Boxing Board of Control after what happened with Wardley, and then the aftermath of the fight with Wardley where he appeared to hit the referee. But that has been sorted, and Adelaide can fight on in the future. Whether the Dakers fight does get rearranged is another thing, but Dakers was out in a rematch himself where he didn't look great the first time round, but did what he needed to do against Webster this time round. Other real good fights on that card as well too. Owen Cooper versus Echo Essman. Chantal Cameron as well making her Queensbury debut, but headlined by Nathan Heeney in a losing effort. Showed a lot of dog, showed a lot of real want and grit to continue on in the fight, but shipped too much here. And Brad Pauls, in a similar sort of vein in how Nathan Heeney won the fight, it was a real good, feel-good moment for someone who'd made their name on their small hall stages and taken their opportunity now to capture a British middleweight crown.
Oh, absolutely. It was a really good fight. The one you mentioned before, Essman against Owen Cooper, that was a fantastic fight, actually. Real back and forward, flowing. You thought Cooper was going to get the job done. He'd already been dropped. Then he came firing out for the 10th, and Essman got rid of him. It was an excellent, excellent fight. The main event itself was a really good fight. I fancied Brad Pauls, actually, for this one. Heeney, I think he's done the best he can with his kind of limitations, and he's a really fit, strong guy, excellent support. He had an on night when Denzel Bentley had an off night. No excuses. I thought Heeney was brilliant that night. And then the first fight against Pauls, he was like 1 point swing away from losing his title, and it kind of felt like he got away with one. I just liked Pauls' belief. I know before the fights, guys say, "Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm feeling strong." But I didn't agree with the TNT commentaries assessment of it, to be honest. I really thought Pauls was a good 4 or 5 rounds up towards the end. They seemed to have it very close, felt that Heeney swept a lot of the early rounds. The knockdown was a real turning point on the cards, and that was the major turning point. I'm not so sure I agree with that. I think Pauls was actually doing really well. He was getting the jab going. He quickened up the feet, as Richie Woodall said, and the right hand was working time and again. And halfway through the fight, I said in the Nutters group, I felt that it was just a case of if Pauls has the engine, if he's done the work in the gym, which we think he has, for the fitness and the gas tank, then he wins this fight. Because technically and stylistically, he had every move that he needed to beat Heeney. All the straight shots, like his corner was saying, the jab, the right hand, just keep it nice and straight. You're landing every time, and he was. And those whipping left hooks to the body. He has a real nice left hand. I'm wondering if he is a left-handed fighter who fights orthodox, because the way he was throwing the jab, hooking off it, and whipping those hooks underneath to the body, they took their toll on Heeney, and he was absolutely done at the end. But the right hand as well was the honey punch, the key punch. And fair play to Pauls, just seems like a nice guy. He's from an area and Cornwall and that. There's not many champions, I think, since 1939 was the last time they had a British champion. And he just deserved it. He earned his stripes and did everything he was supposed to do. As for Heeney, I think they were talking about him being tight at the weight. I think he's reached his pinnacle now. He's done a fantastic job for himself, but I don't really know where he's going to go from here. But as for Pauls, he put the night of Jake Paul, it was all about Brad Pauls, and he paid tribute to his cornerman Terry Stewart afterwards as well, and said that he'd sort of got him through all these tough times, and he only expects himself to be a small hall boxer. And just a nice inspirational story, and the British title does mean something, as Ozzy used to come on and say. And as for some of the other fights you quickly mentioned there, Solomon Dakers, didn't think that was too inspiring. Would have rather seen the Adelaide fight, wasn't to be. Rematch against Webster. Felt like it was there for Webster, not to win, but to cause problems, and he just wasn't able to do it. And Chantel Cameron didn't really see too much of that fight. And it was a shame Liam Davis fell off, as you said. I think Liam Davis is maturing into a really nice fighter and one of the better fighters in the country. But all in all, it was an exciting show. Essman Cooper and the main event, the rematch between Heeney and Pauls, are both very good fights. So shout out to the Nutters who went along and watched it.
Shout out to the Nutters who went along and watched it, and then I bumped into them at the hotels. Ricky, Joe, Mikey, Holly, and Kevin, who are all there. And it was a lovely little moment. If you guys were able to sample that for a second, you'd obviously feel the love and appreciation you've had for keeping the show going for a mighty 580 episodes. 20 weeks away from 600, Steve. That's going to be a bonanza. I'm setting up the expectation levels now already for it. Matt Butter is saying here, though, I thought Heeney had a tendency to just get distracted during the fight, as if his mind was a wonder. Didn't quite pick up that from ringside, but Heeney did say himself that he felt that he kind of got a little bit complacent and wasn't really wary enough of Brad Pauls' power and would be in the rematch. I just thought I'd probably expect a little bit more from Nathan, who boxed so beautifully against Denzel Bentley. And he's someone who in the amateur game, he was a bit of a nearly man, really. Got to finals, was always in around the mix of some amateur tournaments, but never was ever the winner, but had that pedigree to go far into those type of tournaments. And he was able to rely on that, call back on that in the Bentley fight, but wasn't in the fight with Brad Pauls. But it wasn't just the commentary that was saying that Heeney was ahead. According to reports, the judges, Steve, had Heeney ahead too.
Oh, did they? Right. Okay. I heard one of the judges had Pauls up by 5 rounds, I think. I'm not sure about the other ones, but if that was the case, I would agree with that. And we've mentioned before about the distraction. Matt mentioned it there in the chat as well. it is a big job he takes on, you know, selling all these tickets and everybody's his friend. And you wonder if he's about 2 rounds down stamina-wise by the time he gets to the ring, doing all the shit, the shouting and the singing and all that, getting in there. But he is a naturally fit guy. I felt that the rounds he was winning because Pauls wasn't really doing that much early on. Like Heeney was just winning them by virtue of throwing out the jab. It was a lot of pity-pat stuff. But when the other guy's not doing anything, then you're going to be picking up the rounds. He wasn't really dominating him or asserting him. And when Pauls had that confidence, look, I can hurt this guy. I can throw the right shots. He was able to land them. And I'm no technical expert, as we all know. I mean, anyone who's seen me in the ring. But I just noticed something with Heeney that there was times when if you could make him miss, you could really make him pay. And that was, I think, when Pauls landed that right hand in the 4th round. There was times when Heeney was throwing the shots, and just for a split second afterwards, he was kind of out of position, and he did this a few times. And I thought, if Pauls can kind of pick up on this and land that right hand or that left hook, or maybe the distraction right hand, throw it away almost and bring the left hook across, he could have success. And he started doing that as the fight went on, started to believe in himself and started to really make Heeney pay for his mistakes. And ultimately, as I said before, if he was fit enough and the gas tank was there, he would win. They are very well matched, says Johnny, but Paul's just a little bit more talented. That's what I said. All about stamina for Pauls, technique-wise, knowing what to do. It was all there for him. The corner were telling him what to do. He was able to do it. It was just if his gas tank would hold up. That was the only thing, and it did.
Rob, let me bring you in here if you saw this main event or any of the undercard, but just sticking with Brad Pauls here. Middleweight division at the top level is very much open for for one of these underdogs to really kind of leave a hallmark and have one of those big nights where that underdog status turns into a realization where they can maybe pull off a real big win and capture something. Does Brad Pauls have that talent to maybe do that in a middleweight scene that is bereft of those real big elites as they've moved on, and there's an opportunity there to do something? Is there an appetite for you to see a third fight, a potential Denzel Bentley fight for Brad Pauls? What's the lay of the land?
It remains to be seen whether he can do it at the top level. There is levels still. So who would be the potential? Like what way are they navigating him towards a title shot? What would be the path for him now? Like
Denzel Bentley would probably be the most likely thing, or a Hamza Shiraz, which was talked about for Nathan Heeney.
See, I think Hamza Shiraz and him is a great fight. Like, and then we'd have a lot more kind of clear idea of which one of the two of them is going to go for the marbles. Like, I like that one, but I'd say I take Bentley next. Like, and if you got Bentley and Shiraz as the next 2 fights, I think that nobody complain about that. But you're right, middleweight it's bare. It's as barren as it's been in my lifetime. I think, as far as I can remember, in terms of champions. Now, maybe some robot will pull up a statistic now and prove me wrong, but I can't remember a time where it's been more kind of devoid of stars, devoid of big fights, and having nobody in the sport really give a shit about what's happening at 160. So it's there for somebody to put a bit of a run together, maybe try and unify. Maybe someone coming up from 54 might do that. Like, but yeah, I mean, look, a trilogy, a British domestic trilogy is always a great sound, you know, that way, especially if there's high drama in the first 2. So don't like kind of rule that out either. You might get that third one down the line, but obviously not next. He has to move on now and look for bigger and better things. But yeah, the middleweight division is open. If I could get down to 60, I think I could get to the top 20, to be honest with you.
You and Janibek trying to get down to 60 together. That's the thing, though, isn't it, Ames, with Janibek as well? I mean, just as we thought, at least we've got one kind of little shining light. Rob's absolutely right, man. The middleweight division is just looking bereft of talent at the moment. Janibek has unified it by just being the kind of better guy, slightly better than all the others. Adames looked like he might be a bit of a threat to him, and then he puts in that dire performance against Gaucher. But that's at the top of the division. As for Pauls, I don't think they'll do this. I think they will put him in against Bentley with a view to Bentley beating him and taking the title back in sort of that to the Queensberry Arms. But it'd be nice if they would stick a show on down in Newquay or something. There's not very much goes on down there, is there, by all accounts? I know that the darts go to Exeter and stuff, but even down sort of that Cornwall, Devon kind of region, and that'd be nice to have a show down there, like a homecoming for Pauls against an opponent or something. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, he brought a lot of fans. It would just be a nice thing to do, but obviously it doesn't always happen like that in boxing.
Steve, you mentioned about Owen Cooper and Echo Essman putting on what was a brilliant fight to watch round at ringside, especially, and I'm sure it translated over on the TV screens too. It kind of all popped off after the fourth. And Echo is someone who you can tell he knows himself as a fighter, completely experienced at that level, knows his strengths and weaknesses. He had Owen Cooper down and then he emptied a lot of the tank to try and get him out there, but then reserved a lot for a late onslaught after being dropped, which was a peach of a punch from Owen Cooper. But I just wonder, there was a big leap in levels for Owen Cooper going from Ethan James at English level all the way to someone of the ilk of Echo Essman. And will the way that fight ended, will it have a detriment to Owen Cooper going forward?
That's an interesting question. You're looking at it from the Cooper point of view, actually, because I hadn't really considered it like that. I was thinking it more of it from the Essman point of view. But yeah, that is a good point, actually. It could have mental demons for Cooper, although I suppose if he's mentally strong, he could look at it and say, look, I was a round away, really, in my mind, from beating the guy who was sort of British Commonwealth champion on a long run for a long time. And it would have been difficult for Echo to come back down to this level, really. I did feel sorry for him. He's an experienced guy, put his run together, and just when you felt he was on the verge of getting to that next level, he loses to Harry Scarf. Scarf goes over to fight Karen in an eliminator, and Echo's kind of fishing back down with relative novices to what he's been fighting at English title level. It's a bit of a come down for him, but he's always been a very, very fit fighter, and I think that's what stood to him in that 9th round, because I know he was playing it down afterwards, but looking back at the replay, the way he sort of walked into that right hand, that was a heavy shot. And Frampton said it as well on the commentary, and I thought it too. They call him the engine. And if he hadn't been in good shape, that he is a real hard-working, fit guy, there's no way he would have got up and shook it off and come back. I thought like everybody else, Cooper, he was bouncing in that corner. He couldn't wait to get back out. And then within 20 seconds, he was hurt with the left hook, and Echo piled it on. That is some fitness and some stamina. But as for Cooper, it'll come down to mental strength, really, what he takes from it, whichever way he looks at it. I've been banjoed here. This is the end. Or look, I was close to winning the fight against a good guy, just got caught with the shot. You know, the way boxers kind of tell it to themselves. He could do that as well. But as for Echo, I think that this probably going to sound harsh, what I'm going to say, but I know he was playing it down afterwards and he says, oh, you know, it was time to turn up the gears. And it was almost like I pressed a button, no more messing around. I'm going to go and knock him out. But it was a tough 10-rounder against a guy who's had, 10, 11 fights, Cooper, who we didn't really know of before the Ethan James fight. Going hell for leather against a guy of that caliber. Is Echo, is it a one-off? Is he going to get back up to British level, or is it just indicative of he's going to struggle now? He's 35 years of age as well, down at those weights. I would kind of be a bit worried about his future, even though he did come back and ultimately win the fight. The fact that it was so difficult for him, but he's an experienced guy. He knows himself, got a good team behind him. Both guys come out with credit in a fight like this. I wouldn't mind seeing it again. As Bean used to say, I wouldn't mind seeing a rematch.
Rob, I'll come to you on Sol Dakers versus Michael Webster. The rematch, Webster on about...
Yeah, that sounds like a plan, dude. Well, he didn't even start laughing before you finished the sentence there.
Don't worry, I won't ask you specifically about the fight, Rob, but look, in the heavyweight crops, domestically, these fighters, like Sol Dakers, Adelaide, Fisher, and that lot, Dave Allen, you can throw him in there as well, too. They're all trying to make their name. They're all trying to get to that British title level. They're all trying to be the next big thing in the British heavyweight division and further. Is Sol Dakers your guy from what you've seen from him, even in this last fight or the first fight or any fights you've seen before? Do you think Sol Dakers is one of those that can go on and contend higher?
I don't know, but I think those guys should kind of fight each other. I mean, Johnny Fisher's a big ticket seller, so he can make like a sellable British heavyweight domestic clash with the right dance partner. They kind of tried to float it with Babbage, but they knew what way it was going to go. That was a kind of an optical win, but remains to be seen how good he is. Like, he could probably sell tickets fighting fucking Joe Schmo for the next 2 years off the back of the kind of social media stuff. But like, I was only thinking about that today. I don't fucking ask me why I was thinking about Johnny Fisher's career and how far it could go, but I was just thinking about it, like, he, you know, because of his fan base and stuff, we really don't know how good he is and the opposition that he's faced yet. So let's get them two in against each other. The landscape is changing a little bit. Obviously, heavyweight, the top kind of upper echelon is frozen out and pre-planned for the next kind of 2 to 3 years. So for fellas to kind of make a name for themselves, like, a lot of the time the British guys were kind of waiting it out. But you've seen like Wardley, Clark, horrible fight. Like, but it was fucking. It would have been a bigger event, I guess, with a different promotion. So a lot of these things play into factor. Douglas is okay. These guys are okay. I'm kind of heavyweights again. Like it's the top guys, and then the rest. You know, bottom 5, 6, 7 down, and then it can be anything. You know, you can throw Del Boy back in there, which they are. Do you know that way? Like it's the talent level is not massive, but there's potential money makers there. So let's see them in against each other. Why not? Like,
we'll move on from this one, Robert. We didn't get your thoughts on the Jake Paul card if you saw any of that. So feel free to weigh in on that from what you saw from.
I just saw the result. I guess that like the thing about Jake Paul and the boxing thing is we kind of know that it's scripted to it. It's not scripted in terms of like they're going out like they're choreographing it like the WWE or anything, but it's scripted to a point where he's not testing, right? Whatever. Like he's not fighting in any place where they have a commission normally. He's generally fighting an MMA guy who's past his prime and fought in other promotions that he has a massive weight advantage on. Now, Mike Perry was knocking fellas kicking in that BFKB thing. He was their main star. That's a different sport altogether. Like obviously they're all different disciplines, but that bare knuckle stuff is just a different sport than boxing. Like I just like those guys I think will get shown up. And the guys that have done it there in the BFKB, they kind of haven't done it anywhere else, especially in the pro game. But some of them cross over in that, but they don't stay long in it. Like so I think like the script is written for him. It's a sit and duck. He's massive weight advantage. He can punch. He's probably juiced to the gills, and he just sells pay-per-views to people that don't really watch boxing. Like as a kind of a now he has his pluses too. He pays fighters and stuff. Like he's done really well with Serrano, and he promotes fighters, and they all get paid really, really well. But it's not fighting. I guess it's not boxing for me. Like it's not, and I don't think we'd ever see him in, like when we saw him in and Tommy Fury's taking him to school. That fucking tells you everything you need to know. Like who struggled against the other fucking YouTuber. So we always said at the time, like if he fought a top guy, he'd be obliterated. I still think that's true. Saying that, he's probably lived the life of a pro fighter for the last 5, 6, 7 years. So he's going to make improvements. He can probably hang with some fighters, but he's not a fighter. Like, and it is all optics. Like, you know what I mean? So that's all I think about that. You know what I mean?
Before we move on to previewing next week's action, was there anything else from last week you saw from over in Japan with Nakatani defeating Astrolabio, which for me looked a little bit suspect? I don't know, Rob, if you saw the clip.
I don't know.
Of that.
I think, yeah, no, I don't know. I think you only even have to, you barely even have to get touched with the tip of the knuckle on the solar plexus from that kind of trajectory and a straight shot down the pipe, like that's traveled as well. I'd say that really hurt them. Like I looked like those ones that fold you when they hit right. Even sometimes you see in landing in history look like they're landing under the elbows or they're hitting the elbows. Even if they clip the elbows on the way in, they can drive your own elbow into your solar plexus as well for double impact. Like so, it's I think that was a legit knockout. But he looks the business, Nakatani, the Nakatani Plaza, as I call him.
How do you feel he fares against Inoue?
High level fight, you know. I think as long as I think it's whoever figures the other one out. Like if Nakatani can figure Inoue out, I don't think he's going to win in a shootout. I think Inoue is just too powerful. He carries too much power in those hands, and it's all in his technique and the style of punch that he throws. He throws punches like whips. Like the Fulton knockout was fucking incredible. The technique on the way he just turns his wrist over at the last second to get maximum power. And I think technique wise, he just probably has the edge on Nakatani. But fucking Nakatani has to go up for that fight or no?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, so that could be another thing. I think he punches too hard at the weight. I think Inoue could probably go up. I know he's not Superman, but he could probably go up again and carry that power. So, yeah, I think Inoue get to him, but it'll be a really, really good fight. And they're producing some really exciting fighters over there, so that's fucking something to keep an eye on. But yeah, that'll be I think a technical fight until Inoue figures it out.
There was also other action in Japan in the form of Matchroom Boxing making a return with a tournament-type format. I don't know if you caught this, Rob. No worries if you didn't.
Prize fighter kind of 10 in a row fight or something, though, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. They're offering a share of $100,000 if you got a stoppage in your fight as well, too, for the fighter. So nice little bonus there, which ended up being shared between, I think it was McKenna, Conway, and Kunimoto, I believe, who got a share of that money. Mark Dickinson, maybe a bit of a surprise there, dropping.
Which McKenna was that?
It was Aaron McKenna.
Right.
So Aaron McKenna, Mark Dickinson doesn't advance, but McKenna, Conway, and Kunimoto, I believe, advanced to the next round there of that tournament with a lot of money and a potential to become, or at least grow their name a little bit further.
I love the prize fighter format. Like, I used to love that format, and I thought that they would have made massive money if they had brought that to small hall shows in the US. But obviously, commissions and everything vary. But I'm sure, like in Florida or something, you'd be able to get a prize fighter tournament going on over there. Heap of Mexican fighters, heap of American prospects without promoters, and kind of like, you know, make a star out of it, or make a guy who's worth investing in going forward. Like, and you really engage with the fans on it with that format in the States. I think it's a winning format. The Japanese one's a little bit different because the commission regulations wouldn't allow them to have the fighters go back out on the same night like the prize fighter over here. So that loses a little bit of it. Like the tournament, when it's played out over a couple of months, it's different than other tournament sports like a Wimbledon or a soccer tournament where they're kind of playing every other day, and it's kind of going on for sustained. A tournament over like 7-8 months is not. You saw with the Super Six, the fucking thing is 2 years in the making by the time you get the champion and the winner and that. So I would have preferred to see the old format, but if they can't do that over there, that's not bad. Like, and it's, like you said, good little paydays as well for the fighters.
We'll move on to next week's action, and that starting off with a fight that I think Holly described it yesterday, one of the Nutters. She described it as a fight where she'll be watching almost through her fingertips, because it's a fight where no one really called for, and there's a lot of miles on the clock combined between the two. But I guess with the lure of a big payday, a Saudi slice of that action over there, if for the winner and retirement, you'd imagine for the loser here, it was just too much for either fighter to turn down, and they've got to go through each other to get that opportunity. But I don't think this will be an exciting fight. These two fighters have brought excitement. For Joyce, for me, is I think underrated by, even you've got to account his vulnerabilities here, but he is an exciting fighter to watch. His fights are exciting, and Chisora's brought that level of excitement as well through fights in his past. But to match them up with each other, I don't think it'll be a pretty sight, Rob.
Definitely not going to be a pretty sight. Nothing pretty about it. I don't think Chisora will retire even if he loses. I think he'll fight again. Like he just can't. He can't stay out of the game. Like, unless he stated otherwise, and I make a fool out of me. But I can't see him retiring even if he loses. I think Joe Joyce, even with the collateral damage of the 2 losses to Zhang, can't lose to Derek Chisora. Not this version of him. Like, I just can't. I just think Joyce will step on him late. Like, I think Chisora will hang in there. He'll try and force it, but is he going to be able to force Joyce back? Like, Zhang is a monster, you know, that way. So that's the way he was able to do that to Joyce. He's a big guy, like a freak, massive puncher as well. Chisora's big puncher, has power. His form is on the slide. He should have been out of the game maybe 5 years ago now. Like, he's taking some serious punch. Like the second time he lost to Fury, all those years ago. Not the third fight, the second time. If he'd have retired after that, I don't think anyone would have blamed him. But he's hung in there, he's taken some shellings. And I just don't think he's going to be able to pose a threat to Joe Joyce. But having said that, I don't think he's going to retire either. So, possible opponent for Johnny Fisher down the line. Do you know what I mean?
What direction do you go with either of them? Well, either of them if they're the winner here. Because there was some rumours, Rob, that the potential plan was, had Joyce gone through Zhile Zhang the second time round, and maybe if Wilder had continued to win, that Wilder and Joyce could have been a fight that they've done over in the UK. But with Wilder now falling out that mix, so I don't know what he's doing at the moment. We'll see if he returns to the ring. But the winner, you can't put them in straight away at the top. So. And I don't think you see him beating any of the top-level fighters either. Maybe a Parker rematch specifically for Joyce?
I don't know. I don't know. I think it'll be a hard road back to the kind of trajectory that they were at before. He was on the cusp. Joyce for a couple of years. He was the IBF's number one guy. People would have probably gave him, in with a shout of beating any of the top guys, and he just fell short while waiting out his chance. And I don't know even if he goes back up. Like, you have to see what happens after Fury Usyk. Like, I'd imagine maybe both of those might retire, or Usyk will take a long break, I'd say. And Fury, I'd say, might retire, announce a retirement, or go straight to an AJ fight. So we don't really know what's up there. We have to see what happens in the shake-up with AJ and Dubois as well, because if Dubois turns things on his head there and upsets the apple cart and flattens AJ, I'm sure there's a rematch for AJ, so that will weigh things out again. So really, it's just seeing who's out there. Maybe an Otto Valiant kind of guy like that, just to keep busy while a fight presents itself. But I really don't know if there's bigger opportunities for Joe Joyce. He's older too. Like, he was kind of an older heavyweight when he turned over. So I don't want to sound like it's all doom and gloom for the guy, but it's hard to see a path to glory for him. That way.
So you're telling me that you saw, or if you didn't, definitely go grab a quick look of it, but the clip of Chisora handling that delivery driver and giving him a cheeky little headbutt didn't give you renewed vigor that he's back and ready to put some pain on Joe Joyce?
No, I can't see. I think Joyce steps on him. Like, I can't see. I think he'll offer resistance, but I think he's just going to be too slow, too small. I think he'll try to force the pace, but he's not going to be able to put Joyce on the back foot where he wants him. Parker was doing a true head movement and stuff as well. That way, Jailboy is not really like dip and roll or whatever his way in. He's hardly arching more. Like, he's going to walk straight to him. And I just think Joe Joyce with volume will end up breaking him down. Might stop him like maybe around 10 or something.
I asked you about Soldaker being one of those fighters in the mix, but one of those who has really kind of captured the imagination of boxing fans and also captured the eyes of them is Moses Itama. He's now taken himself over to Ben Davidson, working with Ben, and he's in against Marius Vac, which looks like, for all the worth of it, as real good matchmaking, and maybe looking to steer past the, I know he's only young, so the British scene and all that, and look to be on that fast track to world title contention very soon. That was the plan. He might end up missing out on beating Mike Tyson's record, but he might not be too far off of it. Of course, he's got to wait for everything to settle at the real top end of the scales. But Moses Itama looks, for all intents and purposes, to be that big breakout star, Rob.
Yep, good technique, good puncher. Seems to have a bit of something about him. But we have to see these guys getting hit too. For heavyweights, you have to see what he prove his beard when he moves up the opposition. But yeah, like, the guy has everything. Probably could have fucking had no complaints. I think probably worse guys with worse ability have had cracks at the title already. That way. So, I wouldn't be surprised if he does kind of have a long reign when he gets there. But we'll have to see that.
The fight I wanted to make mention of as well too is a rematch between Dennis McCann and Oyona Baluta. Baluta, who he's a gatekeeper for these British prospects, and you either come a crop or you end up going past him. And Dennis McCann was probably on the favourable end of I think it was a win, wasn't it, for Dennis McCann? Very fortunate to get that at your call, but it was a brilliant fight there. I know he beat Andrew Kane, didn't he? Who's now bounced back and beaten Ashley Lane last night there, but a rematch for Dennis McCann. He's really got to look good against Baluta, who he's still got plenty left in the tank.
Yeah, I mean, I always go on the kind of 99% out of 99 times out of 100, the better fighter win the rematch. So we'd see who the better fighter was. Like, maybe McCann had an off night. Maybe he wasn't expecting him to be as tough as he was. He was a kind of highly spoken of prospect. Has everything, is kind of navigating his path. And as we see time and time again, boxing will find you out, like, at certain times and see what you're all about. And the Baluta fight was one of those. He got the nod, but could have gone either way. So we'd see when McCann put in a better performance this time. My gut instinct is that he's more polished and doesn't mix it as much, and but that fading down the stretch, like, could fucking catch up with him. So we'll see. I think McCann's the better fighter. I think he'll probably win the rematch, but we'll see.
Rob, just before we close out, I've got a couple of little loose ends that I want to touch on. We were talking about the heavyweight mix, and you mentioned him as well too. Otto Volin comes back in a comeback fight, as does Justice Heeney as well too. Got the victory, but he's back out again, trying to get back and hanker a big opportunity over in Saudi again. Danny Jacobs as well too has since retired after the defeat to Shane Mosley. It was a little bit weird to hear Shane Mosley kind of come to the conclusion that after beating a very faded Danny Jacobs in their fight, Danny Jacobs hadn't fought for years and hadn't been seen in the ring since John Ryder got, for some people, a very lucky decision over Danny Jacobs. Shane Mosley then went on and said, hey, look, I beat a world level fighter. I'm now world level too. But what's your assessment of Danny Jacobs' career as he's now hung up the gloves?
Yeah, strange one. He lost to the guy Pereira, didn't he, early doors, and a lot of people wrote him off. Then obviously he had his battles with cancer, which he overcame, and people, were calling him a miracle man. He was a kind of a middleweight around that time of the PBC era, where they were kind of keeping him off the radar of Golovkin for a long time. But I think by the time he fought Golovkin, he actually he started it, or he had it. That was the night Golovkin showed his first glimpses of the slide. So I think he was a good, solid guy. He beat some good fighters. He definitely could punch. And I think he was a B-level middleweight that won a world title, I'd say. I don't think he was an elite fighter by any stretch. But he was a very capable operator. Very surprised to see him back. It must be money related. To see him back in against an opponent like Shane Mosley Jr. was a little bit bizarre, but it probably says where you're at. If you can't beat Shane Mosley Jr., you probably do have to hang him up. I think he started his career popping hot, didn't he, as early as 3 or 4 fights, Mosley Jr., and has been underwhelming for most of his career. But I was listening to Shane Sr., by the way, who was saying that it was the promoters who weren't giving Mosley Jr. the shot that he really deserved, that it's all about the promoters, and if you can get in with the right promoter, which is true to a degree, I guess, because you think they would have been able to trade off of the Daz name a little bit more, like some of the other fighters, especially when he was such a great. But Son has to hold up his end of the bargain too. I don't think he's world level, but we might see him in some bigger fights down the line. Again, that's kind of that whole kind of weight class is there for the taking, unless they're up at 68, were they?
He's had those opportunities, Rob. He got found out against Brandon Adams. They put him on that Contender reboot show. He then fought Jason Quigley, lost to Jason Quigley, close fight. If I remember it correctly, he lost that. He beat Gabe Rosado. It was a good little win there, but he's had those moments and opportunities, and he's faltered through his own doing.
Yeah, I don't think he's good. Like, he's not good enough. Like, he's definitely not good enough. Like, but I think they probably, what I mean is that a promoter could have took him, ran with him, gave him a few gimmies, and traded off the Mosley name, made him look like he was a bigger prospect than he was, if you get me. Like, I think they could have marketed him better, but I don't think he's any great shakes. Like, he's certainly not in the Daz level. And like I said, if the fighters that you mentioned that he lost to, like, they're, it's a Gabe Rosado thing, isn't it? Gabe Rosado with his 19 losses, still 19 or 20 losses, you still have an excuse for nearly every one of them and believe that he was world class. It's just something boxers say to themselves, like, that way.
Yeah, no, he completely on that one. Just final topic here, Rob, as we close out. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the state of boxing in the UK with the report that Frank Warren, now good buddies, best buddies with Eddie Hearn, looks to be finalizing a deal with DAZN, once called Dead Zone and mocked by Frank Warren quite liberally across the outlets, is now looking to finalize the details on joining DAZN, which would then leave one sole broadcaster on the sort of traditional terrestrial cable, whatever you want to call it, Boxer on Sky Sports, who are also, it seems to be, potentially on shaky ground as they look to maybe get a renewed deal for Sky Sports Boxing, but
they've done fuck all. Boxer have done fuck all. They're right off. Like, so in terms of the landscape, addressing the landscape, Boxer are not entity. Like, they made so many unfortunate decisions or poor decisions. They put their eggs in the wrong basket. I think they did a multi-fight deal with Joe Parker, was one of their first signings. Like, when he was absolutely going nowhere. Like, like, obviously they've reignited the career under Andy Lee and stuff, but like, his path to even, like, why would you sign a guy like that? Like, you're looking at sign the stars. The Ben Whittaker one obviously was kind of one that will come to fruition down the line, but they've been extremely underwhelming. They haven't been able to sell the big British domestic fights that they've managed to get on. I don't think they've utilized Sky's platform at all well, the way that Matchroom used to. And we used to give Matchroom pelters because Eddie would tell you anything, like, and he said that himself. But the way that they sold the fights was a lot more engaging for the public, a lot more interesting for the public. And boxer shows go by and nobody gives a fuck about them. Like, in terms of the zone being Matchroom being on the or Queensbury going to the zone, Frank must have finally got the subscription numbers that he used to be always asking for. Tell me the subscription figures. And now that he's finally got them, he's on board. Listen, money talks and bullshit walks the marathon. Eddie and Frank can both bullshit with the best of them, and the both of them are salesmen trying to do their do the best for themselves and for the fighters. I'm sure that His Excellency's involvement in boxing has made terms between the two guys a lot more agreeable in terms of they're not necessarily bankrolling a lot of these fantasy fights that the fight fans want to get made. You now have a seemingly like a pot of gold that they can draw from to make bigger cards. And maybe boxing all on one home is not maybe a bad thing when you can see then that there's kind of no network issues, because sometimes you have a promotional issue and then you have a network issue. We always see it in the States. We have the PBC, we have Top Rank, we have Golden Boy, then you've got Eddie's Matchroom, you've got all of them on different networks. And it was nearly making big fights impossible for like 2 to 3 years. You know, you just get you'd hear it like you'd hear that as soon as you hear the two fighters on different promotions, you go, all right, they're brilliant fighters, they're both the same weight class, never going to fight each other. Where now I think that's changing a little bit. The market's probably changing it. The fire stick is probably changing it. Just the way that we consume media is probably having an effect on it. And I think if Queensbury and Matchroom are both on the zone, maybe fucking the zone might end up doing something, you know, that way. So if you get all the fights on the one network, you probably have the better chance of seeing the better fighters fight each other earlier.
Yeah, I just worry though, Rob, that you're going to have a visual issue in this being not seen by boxing fans because it's not on the traditional ways of watching. I know that, you know, increasingly we're into apps and things like that, and we're, you know, a lot more technologically advanced, and obviously people have been doing that by stealing pay-per-views and such on the Fire Stick and what have you. But moving to the zone is a move for boxing right now, where I think in at least the very short to mid-term might result in boxing and the viewership dwindling even further, and that making a niche sport even more niche.
Yeah, well, it won't affect me because I won't be subscribing to the zone. But I'll still see it, so I don't care. But yeah, I mean, obviously, like I said, that was the missed opportunity for Sky. When you have the promoter, if you're the promoter and you have Sky for a platform, fucking hell, like there's so much traction that you can get for big fights. Look at the job that Eddie did with that one that put him on the map with Groves and Froch. And if you can, I think it obviously helps if you can have two British guys fighting each other, or a British guy fighting a big American star. But there's so much opportunity on Sky to sell the fights in the daytime. Sky Sports News, the different satellite programs, Sky One itself. There's so, you know, if you can create that interest and get people talking, and they see it as a kind of a, like, I can't understand how you can put boxing on Sky Sports and make it a commercial failure. I can't understand it. Like I said, all you have to do is like time the fights at the right time, put them on after the football on a Saturday night. You're almost onto a winner. All you need is just the right dance partners. Like, so I think that Shalom obviously was in a difficult position because Eddie and Frank had all the fighters and he had to start from scratch. And you're basically getting to sign fighters who are either leaving them two or been released by them two. So it was tough. Like it's a tough ask for him. But I do think it's a pity that boxing has left Sky. I really do.
Yeah, it's just I don't know where to stand on boxing, because over in America you've got of course the PBC. They're over on Amazon, Top Rank, and ESPN. I don't know how much longer that's going to last for. You wonder whether, as well, Queensbury Promotions, whether this was a deal of, you know, a contract ending, and there was the potential for renewal here, or one of necessity.
It comes down to streaming. It's a streaming world, isn't it? The Jake Paul thing is going to be on Netflix. I think you're just going to see more than that. Like, streaming dominates now. Streaming is television channels now. Like, you know what I mean? It might as well the television and film companies are now streaming networks, you know, that way. So it's just the way it's going with the market. I don't think boxing's going to suffer, you know, that way from being on a streaming only platform, put it that way. But maybe 5 years ago.
But this is where, like, Netflix to come in and they don't want traditional boxing. They sort of do in the undercard, but the main event here that they want, this huge big mega platform, and it's going to be the biggest event of the year even though we're getting Joshua versus Dubois, we've had the 5v5, we're going to get this Crawford versus Majmurov card with Eminem on there. This is going to be the biggest fight of the year. This is the one that's going to do numbers. It's this side of boxing that the streaming services have been wanting with the KSI fights and such. They've gone first with Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. Sure, an old legend, but it's a gimmick fight here. And that's the problem for the future of boxing that I see right now. Is if you're going to hit the numbers, it's this sort of thing that's hitting the numbers right now.
Get you, but then like Tyson and Roy Jones did astronomical pay-per-view numbers in the States when they had their exhibition. I think it did like 3 million households or something like that. Didn't 1 million, something out. That could be a mad number. Maybe I dreamt that, but I remember it did really, really well. Substantially higher than the average pay-per-view boxing card. But we still had Tank Garcia. We still had Spence Crawford. We still have Fury Usyk. You know, we still have big. I don't think those fights. I think those fights are something that just run concurrently with boxing now as a spectacle. I don't think they're determining the market, but I think streaming itself, like streaming sports, everyone knows that people watch sports on the internet now, not necessarily on the terrestrial television, like or the subscription networks, like.
Okay, then that'll be a debate that will rumble on for future weeks. We'll leave that there for now. To everyone who's tuned in, much appreciated. You can listen to this back as well too. Make sure to leave a comment and like and chat as well too. Much appreciated. Hopefully next week, episode 581, we'll have a bit more of a fuller panel. But I thank Rob Kelly for jumping on. I thank Donna Corby for jumping on. You can catch him on the Wanna Fight About It podcast, and Steve Wellings, former host as well too. Everyone in the chat here, Matt Butters, Iron Fisted Champion in here. We had Ray, no second name, like Madonna. Johnny, good to see Johnny in here. Taz was in here. Shui MC, Boxing Asylum, don't know who they are. Yimmy Yappy, Danny Gilfilm dropped in too. Welch Schmertz, and a lot more others. I'm sure I said Matt Butters there too. But for now, once again, much appreciated. We'll see you guys hopefully next week. Have a good week and stay safe.
We'll never forget.
Ja, dat is gedaan nu.
We want to be honest, yeah?
Crying like a little bitch. I've never met a fucking swank that can fight me.
I fell asleep. I fell asleep.
You're a fucking bum, you're a fucking asshole.
Rumpo fucking Steltskin.
But allegedly, Oscar Rivas has failed a test.
7 year ain't. 7 year ain't. I will fucking smash fucking you.
I hope you fucking die.
Be safe.
I love boxing sounds, as simple as that.